Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 119 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and over 320 partnering organizations from around the world that arose in the midst of the pandemic as initially simply an offering to people globally in creating an open space each day so people could come together to share their experiences of what it's like going through this amazing, unprecedented experience of the COVID-19 virus, and to share solutions and worldviews and confer on how we can increase our strategic effectiveness. Over the weekend, there have been a number of reports that a couple things are happening simultaneously, which are very worrisome for political leaders and public health officials. The first is that the World Health Organization has announced that worldwide, COVID-19 cases now have exceeded 40 million. And we set a world record last Friday of 400,000 new cases reported in a single 24-hour period. Europe, as I reported last week, has been reporting increases that are startling. The European Union now is breaking all of its COVID records. They're now at around 700,000 new cases every week. And the death rate from COVID-19 now in Europe is 5 times as high as it was in the spring. In France, they've declared maximum alert. Where I am in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, we are not under a lockdown, but under, I would say, increased, enhanced security of wearing masks and social distancing. And Rotterdam and Amsterdam have been declared sort of no-go areas unless you urgently need to travel there. Italy, Spain, most of the European Union has some similar kinds of restrictions. In the United States, they're now reporting another daily record of 70,000 new cases just on Friday, with 8 million cases now altogether. And if you compare that to the 40 million for the world, the United States, again, is the worst country in the world in dealing with COVID-19. We're 4% of the human population, and we have over 20% of the cases and the deaths. 18 states set new records last week. And so the pandemic is getting worse and worse. That's kind of one side of what's happening. On the other side of what's happening is what public health officials and political leaders are now beginning to term pandemic fatigue. It was one thing in February, March, April, even May, June. People were astonished that this was happening, fascinated at some level that this was happening globally. Everyone was vigilant. You remember that in Italy, they spontaneously started to sing to each other in Naples, and then around Italy, and then around other countries as people expressed solidarity as they were going into these lockdown experiences with the economies at a standstill. But the pandemic didn't lighten up. And we went through the summer, and now we're in the fall. We're approaching November. And the COVID rates are going up virtually everywhere in the world, with the exception of South Korea, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, China, where the rates are staying reasonably low, in part because the governments have been so consistently restrictive. But Europe lightened up. The United States never did anything because the Trump administration believes in what you call herd immunity, where they're just saying as many people get it, that's just life. It's unprecedented in the history of plagues that the government stands by and does essentially nothing. And in President Trump's case, not only has he done nothing, he's ridiculed the governors and the public health officials who were urging citizens to at least wear masks. And he spent much of last week citing a completely false statistic saying that if you wear a mask, you have an 85% chance of getting the virus, when the opposite is true. So we have rising cases and we have pandemic fatigue. In the middle of this, alcohol sales are rising worldwide. In the United States alone, since the beginning of the pandemic, alcohol sales have gone up 23%. So have gun sales, ammunition sales. The numbers of domestic violence incidences have been going up, not only in the United States, but in Europe and elsewhere. So as we convened today on the 19th of October, the world is bewildered at what exactly we should do to deal with a pandemic that does not appear to be going away at a moment when our publics are fatigued and vigilance is giving way to despair and heedlessness. There are more and more instances of people, particularly the young people, saying, heck with it. We're just going to party. It doesn't matter if we turn into a super spreader event. So the complexities of the human psyche now are intermingling with the complexities of the virus. And how we understand it, how we deal with it, how we form community in the midst of it is the challenge of the hour. So I want to begin our session with what we've been doing each day, and that is to just take a moment or two to pause, close our eyes, and place our attention on our heart in a spirit of gratitude that, as challenging as this situation is, we're alive at one of the most extraordinary moments in all of human history. So just take a minute and try to listen to your heartbeat in a spirit of thanks for life. Thank you, everyone. It's in the spirit of coherence that we need to live our lives. We're being challenged to cope at one level and to reinvent ourselves at another level in a way that ensures the continuity of human life in a more abundant way. One of the challenges is in economics and finance. Last week, we looked at regenerative economics and culture and how we could create a regenerative world. It was exciting, it was dimensionalized, it was profound. And out of it, as you all know, a coalition is arising of institutions in academia, in the NGO community, in the corporate community, and in the political community that are now starting to come together to develop content on donut and regenerative economics that we will be distributing through our academic institutions and through our partnering organizations, probably starting in the new year. It's a very, very exciting time for Humanity Rising. Today, we want to look at the future of impact investing. Several decades ago, the investment community began to wake up to the fact that there was a world out there that was falling apart. And some pioneering souls began to talk about corporate social responsibility and social impact investing. Impact investing, like every other field in the human domain, has been going through many shape-shifting reconfigurations as the world has changed and the needs have presented themselves. So today, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Eliane Oy, who's the founder of Epic, a new impact investing firm who's brought together a number of her colleagues to talk to us about the future of impact investing. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ellie. I turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. If I can ask all the panelists to turn on their camera, that would be excellent. We're very, very excited to be here. Super appreciative of Humanity Rising, of the global movement. I think Michelle said it really nicely in the start, in the run-up to this event. That's like, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste. It's a good opportunity. And I love how you are all embracing the opportunity to change things, to make it better. So I want to introduce briefly the panelists. We have quite amazing people here. I'm very, very happy they could join. To start, we have Cecile Bilious from Pitango Capital. Then we have Looney Liebes from Fledge and Africa Eats, all the way from Seattle. So he's still in the wake up mode. When we have Michelle from Baltimore, Michelle Thimesch from Crowdfund Mainstreet. So we'll be talking about the future of impact investing, and I'm happy for the panelists to all unmute so you can jump in as you please. But before we look forward, I would love to look backwards really a little bit, particularly with Cecile, because Cecile, I believe you've been involved since before it was hip and happening, and even though it's now growing, it's like, would you like to share what got you started and when, and how you've seen things shift?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So first of all, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for hosting me and this wonderful panel of people. And just briefly going back to Jim's words, sometimes I feel like I have a split personality. So on one hand, all these bad things that are going on, but on the other hand, I'm totally optimistic and I'm always driving for change, and I believe in good things to come. So it's a little bit I don't know, there's got to be some sort of definition for that, but we'll leave that to the professionals. So I was very lucky actually to be a CEO of a startup company during the dot-com bubble when it burst. And people will think that being lucky to do that is a silly way to put it, but it was actually very big luck, because I was lucky to work with a Dutch family, the Baan family, which founded the Nober Foundation, who were heavily invested in Israel at the time. And when everything went berserk, started thinking about what happened. And in essence, we started thinking that something went wrong between the connection between capital and values. And in our case, because we're in the sector, then capital, values, and tech, something went wrong. And we said, okay, why don't we regroup and start thinking about how we bring those worlds back together again, thinking about making investments in companies that are creating technologies that can actually benefit society and benefit our planet. And of course, we had no idea what we said and what we were doing. And we started doing all kinds of things that today I would probably brand anything between venture philanthropy and all the way to impact investing and everything in between. We asked ourselves questions about what is the role of an impact investor. Impact investing wasn't even minted then. It's a term that came to be late 2007, and I'm talking 2001, 2002. And we started just deploying capital in all kinds of ways, looking at money as a resource, not necessarily as an asset class, and thinking about how entrepreneurship, innovation, technology can all blend together to make this world a better place. And that was quite a ride. I was really very lucky to be there at the time. In 2011, after words and terms were minted and you could actually Google impact investing, and there were definitions, and the GIN had come together and put some rules, and the community was created and tools and stuff, I thought, okay, so now everybody gets it. And it's clear that impact investing is out there. There's even a Wikipedia definition. So I'll just start a fund and invest in Israeli startups, because everybody knows Israel is the startup nation. So this is where technology comes from. Easy, right? So we developed technology that is globally scalable from day one, because Israel is such a small market that we always approach global markets from day one. Capital for good, impact investors, there you have it. Well, it took me 5 years to convince people that you can actually do that. And still the industry is very nascent, and particularly the world of tech and impact and tech are still very much in the beginning. So it's been an enlightening journey for me, because I was really there when everything began. And I saw the processes happening, but it's also been quite frustrating to see that people are catching up very, very slowly, and it takes a very long time for processes to mature. I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I like to move fast, and that's hard for me. So I think we're seeing a renaissance, if you will. There's a lot going on. I am totally optimistic, and excellent, amazing people are in this together, and we are making it happen slowly, slower than I would like, but here we are. So I think this is the nutshell of the story.
Excellent. Luna, you mentioned in the chat it's a mindset, not an asset class. Do you want to expand on that and how you got into impact investing?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Thanks, Cecile, because everyone looks at me here in Seattle as one of the old timers, and I've only been doing this for 8 years. Impact investing, as I was taught, is the idea that capital can make change in the world. Yeah. Right? The capital, the normal mindset is taught is the Milton Friedman mindset, which is the role of capital is to make more capital, right? Maximize your returns. And it's not the opposite. The other way to look at this is to say, well, we the capitalists have capital to deploy, and that gets us some power. And we should use that power for good as opposed to selfish reasons. And so impact investing isn't just about investing in startups, which is what I do too, right, as my job. It's about using your capital in all areas. And so we usually start when we're teaching this to newbies. The first question is, where does your money sleep at night? Where's your cash? Right? Every investor has some cash lying around. Every middle-class person has a little bit of cash lying around. And what is your cash doing, overnight? Because overnight is what cash does, right? It moves around overnight. Is it just sitting in one of the big giant banks that's trying to maximize its return, or is it sitting at a community bank or a credit union where it's helping the local community, or is it sitting down in a fund that's helping even poorer people, bottom of the pyramid? And those are your choices on where to park your cash. And then you can move on and think about, okay, where's your fixed income investments, and what are your public equities, and just go through all your asset classes and think about whether or not they're doing good for the world or not.
Excellent. And what prompted you to actually get into the space?
That's a really strange story. So I was searching for a place for my then girlfriend, now wife, to work. And she's a professor of philosophy. And in the world of academia, you choose your topic, but you don't choose your city, right? You go wherever the jobs are. And so I was trying to buck that trend because I'm too of an entrepreneur and don't like rules and like that. And so I was searching every school I could in the Seattle metropolitan area to try and find her a place that would hire a philosopher. And I went through all the normal means, and it was only 8 o'clock at night, so I was still looking. And I Googled environment and school because one of her favorite classes is environmental ethics. And I discovered this crazy little business school called Bainbridge Graduate Institute. And unfortunately, it's not with us anymore. It's kind of merged on to other things. But it was 8 years old by then, or 9 years old. And it was the first business school in the world to teach how to do good through capitalism, through business methods. And either good as in sustainability inside big companies, or good as in mission-driven for-profit startups. And it was not the place that hired her. She did get a job somewhere else in Seattle. But while I was there, I said, hey, by the way, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been doing this for, back then, I think it was only 22 years. Could you make use of me? And they said, I'm sure we can find something. And I wound up hanging out in the back of that school, and I've been doing mission-driven for-profits ever since.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for sharing that. That's an awesome story. Michelle, how did you get into the whole impact investing space, and how do you see things evolving?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I got into impact investing when I practiced law in the San Francisco Bay Area for a couple decades. All of my clients were small business owners. I did a lot of transitioning of small businesses, a lot of succession planning. And of course, as small business owners, my clients always needed funding for the things that they were trying to do, to use capital as a force for good in the world. And it was always a struggle, always a struggle, despite the fact that these were actually very high net worth individuals. It struck me as very odd that even these people struggled with financing their more mission-driven endeavors. So when the Jobs Act of 2012 was passed, when the Jobs Act of 2012 was passed in the US, that gave us a new category of financing in the form of investment crowdfunding. I became obsessed with that and watched it for over 4 years, which was the time it took for it to actually get the regs so that we could launch investment crowdfunding platforms. So in 2016, by this time, I was starting to feel like we would never get the regs. It was never going to happen. So in 2016, when the regs finally came, I decided to leave my full-time law practice and launch an investment crowdfunding platform called Crowdfund Mainstreet, because I did not see that there was any difference in the kinds of platforms that were emerging, that were in this space. It looked like business as usual to me. And I thought that we were missing the boat, and we weren't taking advantage of the true impact that this type of vehicle could have. So that's how I got into it. And as far as where I see it going, the numbers it's slow. It's never fast enough for me or anyone else really in the ecosystem, but the numbers are pretty incredible. We're seeing momentum, particularly since COVID. It seems like people are starting to appreciate the fact that we do need some new categories of financing.
Yeah. Yeah, I too had a bit of an awakening when I started off in the public administration space, and then went to consulting, and then went into NGO work, and then turned back to consulting, as I said, the dark side, and then started investing. And then I was like, wait a minute, what did I always wanted to do? Oh, that's right, doing good and doing well. This is a great combination. I don't know why not everyone is doing this. So I love that all resonates with you so well. So very grateful for people like yourselves in the world. What I'm really curious about, and we'll go through each one of you, because I'd love to hear your perspectives on this, is where do you see things, like what's the right way? Impact is a huge topic, right? It's like it's everything. We have the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then we have ESG, like environmental sustainability, good governance stuff, and it all is interrelated, and the Sustainable Development Goals cover literally almost everything. It's like, how do you bring this then into practice? I'd love to hear some case studies from you if you want to share. Cecile, let's start with you.
Oh, sure. So like Luni said, impact is a mindset, and it's really about who you are as a person. So I do, by the way, the same exercise like you do, Luni, when I speak to students mostly, and I say, you all have pension funds. You actually have money in the stock market. Where is it? What is it doing? Just ask. You might not have a good answer, or your broker might not have a good answer, but if you ask, and enough people ask, then there will be some answers, and people will start thinking about, maybe if you're asking, then you really want your money to do something else. So we're all accountable, and we should all think about our behavior, not use so many, straws, or think about recycling everything we do, or even upcycling, and not even create waste, or what we eat. I mean, everything is interconnected. This is not just one thing that you do and then you do something else in the afternoons. It's who we are. Now, you're right that the larger framework that the world has looked at in that sense is the ESG framework, so environment, social, and governance. And that's something that to me should be like a mandatory for any company. Anything, any company that exists, or any organization that exists, should exist and manage itself in a way that is accountable for people and planet, and for good governance, etc. That's just a given to me. The fact that it's not like that is mind-boggling. I mean, who would want to invest in a company that doesn't behave in a fair way to its employees, or is not diverse? Or it's just like, to me, this is unacceptable. And I think with time, with the millennials stepping in and inheriting all this capital and deploying it, you'll see that it will totally become unacceptable. Then we have the Sustainable Development Goals really helped us, impact investors, stop saying the word impact, because the word impact is confusing. And a lot of people have asked me during all these years questions like, what does impact mean to you? Is it like it's a subjective thing? Impact is not subjective, but the Sustainable Development Goals are very objective, and they're there in a way that design the goals and not the solutions. So you can really try to address any goal with any kind of means and any kinds of asset class. So you can do a solution that is based on a non-profit activity or for-profit activity, tech, non-tech, whatever. So the idea of putting impact together through the SDGs is something that I believe helped us all align around the same values and the same targets. So that is actually a very good thing, and it should be embedded as far and wide as we possibly can. Now, and here is where I split the world to me, because right now, and for the past 6 months, I joined Pitango, which is Israel's largest venture capital fund. It's been around for more than 25 years, manages $2.5 billion. It's a big ship, funds from early stage to growth, healthcare. And it's always been a fund that did no harm without really calling it that way, but they weren't looking at impact or sustainability. However, they did join me in my previous company, investment company, which was the first one in Israel that invested in impact tech, and became my partners there just because they wanted to understand what that was. They didn't even know where to park it. I mean, it wasn't really part of the fund. It was more like, let's try and see what's that. And this is where I split the worlds apart. So today we have impact funds, the ones who call themselves impact funds or impact investors, and they have clear definitions of what they're trying to achieve. The KPIs are clear, the goals are clear. Hopefully they are using some sort of impact measurement and impact management practice, which is a big debate, so we'll not go into that, but at least they're using something, and they do have some KPIs, they have some reporting going on, and they're very clear on which companies they'd like to invest in, what kind of products they want to support, and sometimes they even have a theme or a geography, and that is very designed and very nice. And that's where the $715 billion, which is invested currently in impact investing, goes to. Next to that, you have all the other capital in the world, and $715 billion is what, 1% of capital under management? You know, okay, so not even.
Not even. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's nice, but it's not scalable enough. We need to do more than that, and that's where I crossed, if you will, the chasm to the other side, and decided to join Pitango, which is a mainstream venture capital fund, as head of impact and sustainability, in order to do just that, to start looking at impact, sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals, the ESG framework as a baseline in a normal mainstream venture capital fund. And I hope that by doing that and showing the way, other VCs will join, and then we don't need to wait until new impact funds or impact tech funds are established and new investments are made, which are great. That's not good enough. To me, the next step of the evolution is to mainstream it by bringing it to mainstream funds. Of course, there's adaptation that's necessary. It's a slow process. You need to embed it into the fund. You need to look at the existing portfolio companies. You don't need to wait for the new ones. You can actually migrate the ones that are already existing. So that's where we scale in fast. And there, the framework of ESG and SDG are the outlines, but we need to understand how the VCs work or how the funds work in order to really adapt the methodologies in a way that really can be embedded and not just come in and say, oh, okay, you guys, you're not reviewing this, and that. Your report isn't including this, and that. Therefore, you cannot be in our club. That's the opposite of what I think. I think we need to be inclusive, but with being conscious of impact washing and being conscious of the inauthentic way that bad people could use this to do marketing. So let's assume that we're taking these out of the game. I think that there will be a big wave and a big will. Now examples are going to be exactly that. So one example is going to be a company from Impact First Investments, my previous company, which is a company called Angel Sense, a company that was created and formed by two fathers of autistic children, and created a tracking and monitoring device for autistic children that is sold across the world, mostly in the US, and really saves the lives of autistic children and helps parents know where they are and if they are in any kind of danger, to immediately know about it, to interfere and take care of their children. And if they elope and get lost, which is something that happens to a large percentage of them, find them and very quickly before something bad happens to them, and also prevent abuse and all kinds of bad things that happen to children who are nonverbal. It's a company that sells its product. It has a solid business case. It's maximizing its profits. The more devices are sold and the system works, the more lives are saved and the more money is made. So there's an intrinsic link between the impact and the business. And it's a company that was born out of impact, what I call an impact native company.
Yep.
Now I'm going to talk about a case of a company that I'm working with in Pitango, which is not an impact native company. It's a company I call impact migrant because we're going through this migration process. It's a company called Via. Via is a rideshare company. It's a unicorn. If you haven't heard about it, you should know about it. It's a company that offers ride-sharing opportunities everywhere. It works across the globe. And you know, you would think, okay, so what's the connection between ride sharing and social impact or environmental impact? Well, actually, it turns out there's a very, very big connection. Number one, the more you reduce single occupancy cars on the roads, the more you reduce congestion, the more you reduce carbon emission. Hence, the air is cleaner in the last mile of the cities or the inner cities. And you need less parking spaces, so the cities can actually build more parks and less parking lots. So that's one thing that is being measured, and you can see that the more cities are using the VIA technology for their public transportation, the more there is a reduction of carbon emission. Next to that, there's the social element. So VIA is providing fair and affordable and accessible transportation to people in transportation deserts, for example, places where you don't have a bus, or if you need to take the bus and it's a low-income community, then in order to get to your job, you might need to take 3 buses and you'll never be on time, so you won't be able to have a job. So just by allowing the public transportation systems in those areas to use the VIA on-demand ride sharing, then all of a sudden you create social equity and social mobility for people who don't have access to transportation. And you'd be surprised at how much transportation is important for social equity. Next to that, think about the school buses in New York, all of them working with the VIA software. Think about mobility for people with special needs, all of them covered by VIA and VIA vehicles. Think about employees during COVID-19 when there was no public transportation and you had to get to the hospital, you had to get even to the supermarket as a necessary worker. How did you do that? VIA took the people. So all of a sudden you see that when you look at the actual business of VIA, you can see that it really creates real, true social equity for people everywhere. And when you have that in mind, so through the migration process, we worked on understanding, first of all, making sure that the ESG is well taken care of and that the SDGs are recognized and we can see which ones are relevant for the VIA product. And then when that is embedded into the VIA story and how they look at themselves and what they're trying to achieve, and this is integrated within their KPIs, then all of a sudden you see people who come to work and say to themselves, I'm not only working for a company that's creating ride sharing, I'm actually helping people get to school. I'm helping people get to work, and I'm helping people get to the hospital. And when you look at their clients, be it the municipalities or the bus companies or even their own bus activities, these are people that think differently on what is the service that they're providing to the people. So I think this creates much more loyalty and a better support for the VIA brand as well. And when you top that with how investors look at VIA, then if the story behind VIA is an impact story, which is a true story that is substantiated by data, which is collected by the company, then all of a sudden you have a totally different narrative. It's still the same company, but you're tweaking what you're doing internally. They're totally internalizing it. And all of a sudden you have a unicorn, which is actually creating amazing, high, measurable, positive social and environmental impact. So these are the two sides of the equation.
Lovely. That's excellent. I love the terms as well, like impact migrant and impact native. It's a very different starting point, but I think grosso modo, I think we'll probably have much more impact migrants in the world
Absolutely.
than native.
Absolutely.
Luni, you are a little bit known for your uncommon styles of investing, and in impact, you're extremely active. One of them is revenue share. You want to share about that a little bit and tell us why you think it's useful and how you make that operational, really, for impact investing?
Yeah, sure. So the normal way when we talk about impact investing, the default that most people think of is startups. So yeah. Cecile and I and Michelle, we're all investing in new businesses or young businesses. And there's one pervasive paradigm that's in the world on how you do that. And that paradigm comes, we call it California. It comes from the Bay Area and the VCs there. Right, it actually predates that and actually comes from Harvard and Boston before that. But anyway, California capitalism is a term that I found by VCs talking about this. And it's the idea that you buy preferred equity, that you invest in companies that are going to grow to be huge, to be unicorns, and that once they've done that, they will be so big that some other company will come along and buy them, or they'll go public. And that's just the normal way to invest in startups. We have like 10 angel groups here in Seattle. And if you walk into any of them, they're all seeking unicorns. They're all expecting 10x growth from their investments. And they're wrong like 80, 90, 95% of the time. That doesn't come true more often than it does. And therefore, if you are going to invest in general, and specifically if you're going to invest in these impact native companies, you need another way to invest, because most of them don't want to be unicorns. Most of them, when you talk to the entrepreneurs, don't want to actually sell their company. When you look at the history, you actually see a history of mission-driven entrepreneurs who are considered sellouts when they sell their company, as opposed to the tech world where they're considered heroes when they get acquired, right? And so what's really interesting is the same activity, which is being acquired by another company for a large sum of money, is looked down upon in our world of impact and looked up upon in the world of tech. So the question I had back in February of 2012 was, well, if you can't do it the normal way, the California way, how can you invest in companies? And the answer that I came across from another Seattle startup, coincidentally a VC-backed startup, was revenue-based investing. So the idea is really simple. Rather than putting your money in a company and expecting that someone else someday will come along and give you some more money for it, you turn to the company and say, I'm going to give you some money, and you're going to share some of your revenue with me until you've paid me back a certain amount of money. And it's usually a multiple of what you've given them, not a time period, but just a 1.5, 1.8, or 2x multiple of your investment. And it's a small percentage of their revenue. It's a single digit percentage. So it's a portion of their margins. And that's the deal. And you can structure this as debt, which is the most common way it's done. So, simple terms, I could lend a company $100,000 and they owe me $180. 5% of their revenue is given to me, on a monthly basis for the next, usually years, and everybody's happy. And then as I was researching this, it was being researched by Clayton Christensen of Harvard. That's how it wound up over here in Seattle. Really strange story. And so I was talking to his assistant, and his assistant said, oh, by the way, did you know you could do this as equity? And I said, how does that work? And he says, I don't remember. But I know someone who does, and he connected me to that person, and I talked to them, and they said, oh yeah, it's really simple. You buy shares in the company, and they promise to buy them back for more than you paid for them, and the revenue determines how many shares to buy back. And so I'm running what I believe is the most prolific revenue-based equity fund in the world. And as far as I can tell, it's the only revenue-based equity fund in the world. It's called Fledge. It is primarily a business accelerator. So this is trying to solve the problem, first and foremost, back in February, 8 years ago, of how do you do this for the accelerator? How do you invest a little bit of money in each company and then get paid back to run more accelerators? And it works great for that. And so we just take the normal numbers. We did a copycat of Techstars and Y Combinator and all these other accelerators that got started 6 years before us. And they do $20,000 in exchange for 6%. So we said, great, for $20,000 and all our help, we'll take 6% of your company and you'll buy it back for twice what we spent on you, $20,000 plus all our costs of running the program. And 4% of your revenues will determine how many shares to buy back. That's it. So we built in a 2x return. We're on track to deliver that. And it works. And it not only works for American startups that are doing good in the world and European startups, it works out in emerging markets too. where there's never been an exit, where there's never been an acquisition of these startups. So we can invest in any company doing anything anywhere in the world that's earning money.
Yeah. So it actually negates the need for a whole ecosystem and the capital structure of the markets.
It doesn't negate it. It actually creates a need for a large number of funds that are doing this style of investing. And every year there are more, but it's still a little new idea in the world of startups.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, this is the way that film, oil, and minerals are funded. So if you are mining gold, this is just, you just shrug and go, of course, this is how you do it. If you're doing oil drilling, you go, well, of course it's revenue based. How else could you possibly fund an oil well, right? It's either corporate funded or revenue based. But if it's a startup, then this is a new idea.
Yeah. Yeah. It's big in the gaming industry as well, in terms of how games are distributed and movies, etc. So yeah, entertainment, it's prolific there. So awesome that you're bringing this to the fore. In terms of further innovation, I would say there is Africa Eats. Like, you have now designed a new, even more uncommon investment structure. What prompted you to do that?
Yeah, so I've been, for 8 years, I've been known as the guy who's been out touting revenue-based investing.
Yeah.
And I'm throwing it away for some of my investments, which feels hypocritical to me, but it's the right thing to do. So I'm doing it anyway. So what we've done is we invested in 105 companies over the last 8 years at Fledge. And 26 of them are African companies run by natives in the food and ag industry.
Yeah.
And if you go to the SDGs, the number one goal is poverty, the number two goal is hunger. And I don't think that's coincidental, right? I think those are the two biggest issues in the world. And so we were looking at how we could do more to solve poverty and hunger in Africa, given we happened to build a portfolio of food and ag companies. We never set out to do that. We just picked the best companies. And when you're out looking at startups, one of the things you look at is total addressable market, right? It's one of the key stats when you're being pitched an early company. And when you're working in a market where everybody consumes the product, and food is one of the few where food and energy are things that everybody consumes, you don't have to worry about TAM. You don't have to worry about, will anyone buy this product? The answer is everyone eats, or everyone wants to eat. So we wound up with a whole bunch of food and ag companies. And what we've done is take them out of the Fledge portfolio. We've actually sold that piece of portfolio to a new holding company in exchange for new shares in the holding company. And we've put them in this structure where the holding company intends to own them forever. Not for 10 years, not for 15 years, forever. I expect in 2100, this company still owns these 26 companies. We added one more that's not food and ag. So 27, plus it'll probably own another 100 by then. And it's not trying to extract anything from them. So we've learned from the Berkshire Hathaway model, as much as he doesn't do ES or G. He does have this ethos that he built up, that it's a permanent vehicle, that he owns Fruit of the Loom and he's not selling it. He's not owning it because he wants someone else to buy it. He's owning it because he thinks it's a great company. Well, we think these 27 are great companies, and we want to own them in 2100 and 2200 and 2500. And that gives you a totally different mindset as an investor on what to do to manage these investments. Like, we don't own the whole company. We still own a tiny sliver. So we still have the VC mindset of, we're here to support them. We're here to support the entrepreneurs, not to take over. We're not a private equity fund. But we have created this holding company. We've told all the entrepreneurs that we're here to make you better, but we're also here to find ways to make the whole thing better, because now you're part of something that's bigger than your one company. And so little things that we've done that I have never seen before is we told them all that we're taking 2 board seats. We're investing in all these companies. We're raising money to do that. And as we invest in the company, we tell them we're taking 2 board seats, not just 1. But we, the managers of this holding company, are not sitting on your board, which would be the normal VC path. We said, instead, you yourself, we're going to assign you 2 boards. And those 2 board seats that we're taking, will have entrepreneurs on them, fellow entrepreneurs within this holding company. And it's your job to learn from each other. And it's your job to tell us up at management what you need and how you could build things. You know, what's the commonality across your companies? What are some synergies? What are some things that we can do for you to make your companies better? And so we've already had some of these meetings, and every single meeting has had something pop up that we didn't think about, because again, top down doesn't work. We know, everybody should know that by now. Bottom up is the way to go. So we have 27 sets of eyes in 10 different countries in a whole bunch of different markets, telling us what's happening out there. And now they're telling us what's happening by talking to each other as well. And so that's working really well. And then the end goal of this is ultimately similar to Cecile, is how do we co-opt the real world? How do we co-opt the rest of the finance world? And so our goal is to make this a public company as quickly as we can. So right now it's still a pretty small group of companies. They did 7 million in revenue collectively last year. Should do 8 or 9 this year, despite the pandemic. We need to get that to about 25, and then we can go public in Africa. Just not terribly public, somewhat liquid. And then by the end of the decade, 27, 28, we want to be public in London. African companies go public in London. And so that's our goal. And at that point, that then creates an opportunity for every middle-class person and every pension fund, everybody who's an institutional investor, to put money into Africa to solve SDG 1 and SDG 2. Yeah. So we can funnel billions of dollars in. We expect lots of copycats to do this model after us.
Yeah,
so that's my new big thing.
I absolutely love the fact that you're leveraging the actual entrepreneurs themselves, having stake in the game in their own company, helping each other in the peer learning, because there's so much wisdom in every single person, right? There's the skills, there's the experience, there's the mindset, there's the connections. It's so much more than just wealth or cash or a particular industry knowledge that they have. It's the combination that you can really help each other with. So
yeah, and we've seen this in the accelerator, because we put them in the room together in the accelerator, but we put them in little batches. We never put them together in 20s. And so here's the opportunity to do something of a growth stage accelerator meets holding company, meets Berkshire Hathaway, meets impact investment.
Africa Eats. Awesome.
Yeah. It's a beehive where all the bees are working together.
Yeah.
But no queen.
Yeah, right. A cooperative beehive.
Cooperative for-profit.
For-profit cooperative.
The only way
beehive.
you scale up impacts is to be profitable. So we have
for sure.
like 24 profitable companies in this collection.
Yeah, fantastic. Michelle, if I switch to you, crowdfunding, you take the crowdfunding angle. What do you see as the big role of crowdfunding in the impact space, or in the investing space in general, if you did put it more broadly? Ooh, you're on mute still.
What we're seeing right now is really an interest in that bottom up way to go. Start to think. So we've got communities, in the US, we used to have local stock exchanges, right? And so it was very common for people to be able to invest in the communities that they live in and work in. And there was a connection between the companies and their sense of sort of citizenship. In fact, it would not have been tolerated in a local community that a business wouldn't be a good citizen, right? That its money stayed circulating in the local economy. So we're seeing now in our communities in the US, this, ever growing income and inequality gap. We're seeing a lot of interest in people who are not professional investors, don't self-identify necessarily as investors, and wanting to know how they can they understand that their money is not doing the kind of good in the world that they want. They get that, but they don't know how to get around that. And yes, there are some funds and some impact stuff going on in the funds, but a lot of times those are higher amounts than they can contribute at, right? So it's bigger dollars, bigger playing fields. And we're seeing that people are more interested in easing into that, and also having a hand in what exactly gets funded in their communities. And by community, it can mean geographic location. It can also mean industry. So by community, you can mean something that is a sector as well as a geographic location. And so one of the things that we're doing at Crowdfund Mainstreet is working with partners, and this is very new, working with partners to create white label platforms so that direct investing can go to these local economies without the need for each and every one of them to go through the regulatory hurdles to become an investment crowdfunding platform regulated by FINRA, or FUNRA, as I like to call them, because it's actually pretty challenging. And it's not like being a platform is just not that much fun, and it's not really necessary. But the idea behind teaching people how to invest in their own backyards is a really good way to ease people into a type of finance and use of their savings that we haven't seen in this country in generations. So we kind of have to go back. If you don't even know what you don't know, we've had generations of time where really only the already wealthy have had the privilege of investing in small businesses and startups. Then we're starting at square one, and we're starting to teach people all over again that direct investing in local companies or in companies that you happen to have some expertise in that sector is a really powerful way to go to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. And could you give us an example of what that would look like, and a real case where you're trying this on?
Yeah, no, it's great. Revenue share is becoming extremely popular. When I raised money for the platform itself, that's the model that I used because I wanted to be able to grow the platform in a very deliberate, slower way. So of course, revenue share was just perfect as a way for me to raise money for the platform. Revenue share is also popular among companies looking to raise capital on the platform. We are big advocates of structuring an offering that's based on your particular company, not some off-the-shelf instrument that somebody else is using, a SAFE or a convertible note. We like to take people through the process of what works for you, because what works in one company is not necessarily going to work in another company. So customizing those offerings is really important. And what we are seeing is still a lot of convertible debt. We have a publisher right now that has actually been in business for over 30 years that just launched this morning, Barrett Kohler Publishers, who are very mission-driven, B Corp, public benefit corporation, and they're doing equity. So, it really depends on what works for each particular business. We tell people, I don't know how you're going to be a good steward of investor capital if you don't understand what your needs are, what your capital needs are, and how you're going to give that return to your investors. And really the only way to do that is for you to craft an offering that happens to work for what you're doing and the exit. And by exit, I don't mean selling the company. I mean exiting your investors if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah. And do you see the need to grow the ecosystem in terms of potential exits for investors, or do you see more innovation coming in there in terms of how people can actually join in on the investing journey and or kind of tune in, tune out with investments in the local community as well as abroad?
Yeah, one of the really interesting things that we're seeing is increased interest in having a vehicle as an exit strategy, say for a retiring owner. So a lot of times what happens in our small businesses is that owners of these small businesses might not have a place for that company to go. And so the option is when you want to retire, you fold the business, right? Because there may not be an obvious buyer. So what we're seeing is this interest in exit to community, we're calling it, where companies are not just selling perhaps to the employees, which is also another option, but also selling a beloved company to the community itself, so that you can ensure that the ownership and control of that company is going to stay local. So we are seeing a lot of interest in, there's a lot of people who say, why start a new company, buy an existing one,
Yeah.
And we've got the silver tsunami going on, right? As the boomers are aging out of the economy, most of the young people saying, thank God, it's about time you people are leaving. But we've got this silver tsunami. So there's this massive opportunity, this massive transfer of capital that's going to happen anyway. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that being this exit to community, so that people can become business owners that wouldn't otherwise ever have had the means to do so.
Yeah, that's really excellent. I think. Do you pair that offering with education around what it means to own a business, or do you have partners for that?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. We're working with a couple of different groups. There's one actually in Montana, and yes, that would be a serious component of it. And oftentimes the people who are going to lead up these initiatives are in fact key employees, people who understand the business and have been a part of it for quite some time, just wouldn't have thought of themselves as ever being able to access the capital that it would take to take over an operation. So we're not seeing a lot of outside interest in these, although we do have one community where there's a beloved theater that the exit would be to the community to keep the theater local. And yeah, there would be a experienced governing board that would be put in place.
Yeah. And do you link the activities that the Crowdfund Mainstreet does? Do you link them to particular impact? Do you have like the categorization if you talk about the sustainable development goals? Or is it really like, where do you see yourself play with the platform and this particular offering, a community-led exit, so to say?
Right. So what we do as a newer platform is we just focus on sort of we have a high vetting process. A lot of companies, in fact, we just had to turn one down that we've actually been working with for the better part of a year, because it's really important to us to make sure that what we're putting up on the platform is actually to the best of our ability, that these are in fact going to be stewards of investor capital. The other thing that we do is we try to keep the people who have done before. So for example, I just had someone who was very successful, launched in COVID, just wanted to raise a quick $100,000. They didn't want to pay to do the reviewed financials, and was very successful. And now this company is coming back and going to Accelerate, teaching other people how to do this, right? It's part art, part science, how to do this. So our goal is to have those companies that have been successful keep abreast of what's going on, be transparent, because when you're doing investment crowdfunding, the nice thing is, there's no instances of fraud, which the SEC was a little worried about. There have been no instances of fraud. And I think the reason is that if you were going to commit fraud in this space, there are easier ways to do it. You would probably use a different exemption, or you wouldn't register it at all. So that has really helped solidify the ecosystem. And what we teach people is that you want to stay connected in this ecosystem, whether that's somebody coming up from behind you. Already 4 years into this, we have about 23% of the companies that are coming back for a second round. So I think that is one of the things that will really help with the impact. We do have, and we just hired someone actually to work on the data collection for those measurements of impact, which are, have been challenging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a burgeoning field. I think Cecile alluded to it already. It's where it's like impact measurement, definition, and operationalization is it's probably the fastest growing industry within impact investing in itself. Or it's a consulting nightmare or dream, depending on how you look at it.
Exactly.
Excellent. I would love to go to some of the questions that are asked because they're quite apt. We spoke about impact investing and how you can go from not just backing the impact natives, but impact migrants as well. I love that, making it mainstream. We talked about revenue-based financing or revenue share investing and mechanism there, and then pulling it all together and actually making it, instead of a more short-term game, I would say, with equity investing, a longer term holding company structure as an innovation. And then we spoke about crowdfunding and revenue-based financing, but also innovation in terms of how you exit locally, how you can keep things local and basically distribute ownership, which I think is really exciting because one of my wishes for the world, my personal wishes, is for everyone to have enough. And this is why we do EPIC as well. We do revenue-based financing. We want to do crowdfunding style worldwide. This is what we see as a major complementary instrument, as Looney and Cecile and Michelle are saying. But how do you bring that to everyone? It's like, well, that's how you, there's an education component. There's lots of things that we need to put in place. So some of the questions that have come up, one is for you, Cecile. How can we scale up impact investments through the IMF and World Bank's investments, like the big budgets with the big countries? And how do we do that? Do you have views on that?
Well, I'm not sure this is up my stream. You know, my focus is on how technology needs to be much more included in the impact investing market, so we can really scale solutions, because we all know technology is the way to scale, and there's no other way to solve big problems if you don't use high tech. I don't know how the IMF works in terms of investing in funds. I think they're doing direct projects, which are a little far from my world, at least. I think it's, you know, impact investing ultimately means to be everything. And when the IMF is choosing its projects, it's choosing them, I believe, on the basis of the impact that they're going to make, mostly because they do this in emerging markets. So in developing countries where everything you do, basically, or most of what you do will have a positive impact, or can have a positive impact. So it's not a hard jump to manage it. So truly, I don't know. I think if the IMF and the big, mostly the pension funds, which are to me more interesting, because they're the ones who are also investing in funds, the big asset managers, if they step into funds as LPs and ask their GPs to be accountable for the impact that they're making, and refrain from investing in companies that do not adhere to the ESG and have no impact or even harm the planet, then that will drive the market of the asset managers of the funds to make much more impact and allocate their capital in that direction. So I don't know if the IMF has this kind of structure. I'm assuming it's doing direct investments. So I'm redirecting the question over to the pension funds and the big asset owners, who are basically our money, right? Our pension money, into doing much better. I hope that helps.
Yeah, totally. Looney, Cecile mentioned it, you're mentioning it. It's like, you know, you're like an old person in the impact space. You're seen as one of the thought leaders at the forefront. How do you think we can speed things up?
Yeah, this has been a question that I've been talking about since I joined in. The problem is you need proof. The problem is that the world needs proof that this makes sense. The normal idea at the moment is still, if you go talk to you pick a random wealth manager in the United States, and I presume in Europe, and you ask them to please move some of my portfolio into impact, their first response is, but then you won't make as much money.
Yeah.
That's their belief. It's incorrect. All proof that we've seen so far by every single research institute I've ever seen says you'll make more money. But really, I got to say, yes, that seems to be true in the last 10 years, but a lot of it is true because just by being an impact investor means you got rid of your oil stocks, and oil has been a terrible thing to invest in the last 10 years. And you got rid of some or all of your financial stocks, and they were a terrible thing to be in 2008, 2009. So taking that, just put that aside, it's probably been a wash. Like being an impact investor, not in the public markets, means you make the same amount of money, not more. And then in the world of startups, as Cecile is fighting her fight right now every day, the people who are running this gigantic fund are not looking at impact as a way to make more money. They're not looking at impact at all, except to hire her and say, well, maybe it'll help. Right? But that's not one of their top 3 criteria.
Yeah.
And so in order to get there, where it's just a normal thing that everybody does, where every investment's an impact investment, we just need a ton of proof. And unfortunately, in the world of startups, that takes 20 years. It takes 10 years to do an entire normal fund, because funds nominally say they're 10 years long, except when you talk to, I have a whole bunch of mentors who are VCs. The unsuccessful funds close in 10 years. The successful funds extend out to 12, or one of my mentors, he had a great successful fund. It took 17 years to close the fund. 17 years to close a 10-year fund. So you got to run, just call it 2 cycles, right? Yeah. VCs tend to start a fund every 3 years. That's normal. And so by the time they get to fund 4, well, that's 16, 17, 18 years after they started. And then by then they know whether or not they've been able to have one lucky fund or be able to make money as a serious endeavor. And so if we say that impact investing started in 2007, because I think that more or less that was the year, was it Rockefeller came up with the term? Well, then 2027, we should have enough proof to start to say that it's working. 2030s, we should be able to say, this makes total sense. Look how much money we made over here. You should slosh some money over there. And so that's all fitting with my time frame of providing some more proof, providing proof in the revenue path, providing proof in this holding company path.
Yeah.
So I have, if you allow me, Elliot, I'd like to continue Looney's line of thought. And I totally agree that success and success stories are very important. I wouldn't wait for a successful fund. Like Looney said, when you have, your fund is successful when you're done liquidating all your assets in the fund, all the investments that you've made, which takes a long time. But you can take the actual case studies, because they don't all exit at the same time, right? It's a process.
Yeah, but if we want money to go into the funds, if we want the $1 billion impact funds, like we have the $1 billion tech funds, then the funds need proof, not just stories.
True, absolutely. But since we all know this is a long-term game, I think that the fact that millennials are going to start deploying their own money and they care about these values, that's going to change how they choose the funds, and they will create a pressure on the fund managers, on the VCs, to actually make these choices and invest through this lens of impact and not only of capital returns. We all need to highlight the success stories of the individual companies. And 3, which is something that I'm also doing, is we need to educate people and really make sure that people understand exactly what you just said, Looney, that actually there's no compromise between financial returns, or no trade-off financial returns and social or environmental impact. If at all, I think it's the contrary. I think that impact tech companies are going to be even more successful. And we need to educate people. We need to educate fund managers and even people who start working in funds as analysts or principals should be educated, and they should find a community to speak to their peers. They should have tools that are tweaked to impact tech. They should have the ability to go to events, a little bit like what the GIN did. So the GIN in 2007 really coined that term of impact investing and created this database and knowledge and tools and all that. And that in the world of tech hasn't happened. So there's still a very big disconnect between people who do tech as VCs and people who do impact. And so I found this organization called GITA, the Global Impact Tech Alliance, which is inspired by the GIN, trying to create a community of impact tech investors who can talk with each other and share knowledge and deals and ideas and even structured exits like you're doing, and maybe proliferate that knowledge a little bit further. Make sure that people are educated, that students who really want to go into impact investing can have a place to study, and also a place to do some on-the-job training or maybe some consulting that can use these students as people who will do the actual work of working with these big funds. So I think if we all work together, the practitioners, the ones who are already doing it, and tell the success stories and share information and share tools and share deals and just create a community that is vocal enough to come across to everyone in the market, together, coupled with the pressure from the LPs to put their money into things that they care about and causes that they care about. I think that will speed up things. I'm not saying it's going to take a year, but it's not going to take 20 years. I believe it's going to speed it up.
Well, it's speeding up, but it's not, I don't think it's going to be huge. It's not going to be $1 trillion before the 2030s. In terms of scale. Whereas
I would say $50
trillion
billion.
is
I'll settle for 50 billion. If we move from the 1 billion mark now to 50 billion in impact tech in 2030, I'm happy.
Okay, and I'm gonna split hairs with you because I'm an impact investor and I really don't care about tech anymore. Almost all my investments are in impact with very little tech mixed in.
Yeah, we need everyone.
Yeah. Where do you play? Where do you place your bets?
Yeah, and sometimes it's not the people who are going to come along last are the people who are part of the problem to begin with and part of the status quo. So I think when we talk about educating regular people to start moving massive amounts of capital from, say, Wall Street to Main Street, that Cecile's right, that we can see actually a much faster trajectory, hopefully.
Well, hopefully we all know what exponential growth looks like now. Right? After 7 months of witnessing rises and falls.
We all learned mathematics thanks to COVID.
So I have a degree in math, so I was teaching people exponential growth back in March. I was blogging about that. But we are seeing exponential growth in impact investing. But to relate that to 2020, we're in March. And so we haven't got to July yet. We haven't got to the peak, nowhere near that. We haven't got to the super fast growth yet. It's happening, it's growing. Every year I see more of it. Every year I find more funds to be co-investors with, and more money and whatnot. But it's doubling at a slow rate. And at some point it will get to the scale where there are multiple billion-dollar funds and more of them start following each year. And we'll get the IMFs and the World Banks and the other governments to join in with us, and that I think that's going to happen the end of this decade.
By the way, another growth factor will come from the entrepreneurs themselves, because they are millennials and they are natives. And the more I speak to them, and particularly in tech, you see all these young entrepreneurs, they don't care about building companies that are just there to make more money. They do care about causes, and they will choose the investors that will provide them with knowledge and support for their cause, not only for their business. So they will understand the way that it's integrated one with the other. And I think that will also boost the market. So I'm not saying we're seeing the $1 trillion mark anytime soon, but I think that it's not an evolution anymore. It's becoming a revolution. I really feel that.
So Ellie, I launched 2 other things this year to help push this along to be quicker. One of them is the Angel Accelerator. So there was a program here in Seattle that was a copycat of a program in Oregon called the Angel Conference, and it's a program that teaches people how to be angel investors. And so we co-opted the base of that, and we had this theory a year ago that said we could do this to fund an accelerator. And if we could do that, then we can fund accelerators globally. We can make angels locally. And so we tested it out here in Seattle first, and it worked. And next year, post-pandemic, we're going to license this to anyone who wants it. Free if you want to do it yourself. We'll charge you a small fee if you want our help. And so that worked really well. And so if we can do that, then we can grab so many more angels. And then the other one we launched was in February through my nonprofit. We launched a service so that any donor advised fund can make an impact investment. And this has been a hang up. So in the United States, we have this system where high net worth individuals, rich people can donate their money and get a tax deduction, and then it just sits in that fund until they use it. We call that a donor advised fund. I don't know if they have that or everywhere else in the world. And most of that money does in fact get re-gifted each year, but very little of it gets invested. And when you talk to the 2,000 orgs that run these things, they just push back for no good reason. They just don't feel like doing it. So we set up a service in a charity that I happen to have, and any DAF can now make an investment. And we've done this with Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, big community foundations, Jewish Community Foundation, Impact Assets even. And so that's called Realize Impact. And we've moved over $1.5 million so far, soon to be a lot more than that. And so that is now a new channel so that people can dabble who don't want to risk their own money because it's not really their own money. And I'll put that on the chat window.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I'll piggyback that because my co-founder and I have started Angels of Mainstreet, which is a private investment club that's designed for anyone who's looking to move money to more values aligned enterprise. And the idea behind Angels of Mainstreet is that anyone can participate. It's a one-time $100 fee to join, and all you're doing is committing to investing at least $500 in the next year into directly into a company that is doing the kind of work that you want to see in the world. And the reason that bar is so low is because we feel really strongly that we've got to start bringing people into the fold that don't self-identify as having the power of utilizing their money as a force for good in the world.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Making it human again. I love the fact that, we talk about mindset, we talk about humanity rising, and it comes back to everyone having a choice in whichever capacity you're in, right? It's like whether or not you're a consumer, you can check where your savings are at, what your pension fund's doing. If you're a startup, it's like what impact are you doing? And are you going to be one of those impact migrants? Or are you going to be an impact native? Or if you have the funds and you want to invest, where are you investing and what change is that making in the world? So beautiful. Thank you very much for showing up as awesome humans doing beautiful stuff. I'm going to hand it back over to Jim because I believe we have about 6 minutes before we need to wrap up. And I think Jim needs to share some more messages. But immense thank you for sharing your insights, guys.
Thank you very much for having us. It's I love the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes, this has been a marvelous discussion, Looney and Cecile and Michelle. Thank you all. And Ella, you put together a wonderful panel. I would just add one note. in this discussion, whether we're dealing as Looney is suggesting, more evolutionary, we're going to get to it maybe in 2030, and Cecile's inclination to emphasize more of a revolutionary rather than evolutionary change. The note that I would add is the sinking of the Titanic. We've hit the iceberg.
Mm.
And scientists all over the world are telling us we are literally running out of time. So I find myself feeling pained by this conversation, I have to say. It's as if business is as usual, and the moneyed class still believes in the illusion that it has time. And I don't believe that that's true. And I think that the pandemic is a wake-up call to all of humanity that it is going to get a lot worse, much more quickly than we can imagine. And therefore, we have to, in some way, and this is one of the principal reasons why Humanity Rising was established. How do we, in the progressive movement, meaning everybody everywhere who's working for a better world, how do we come together in such a way that we can change the gestalt or change the storyline or change the way of humanity perceiving itself in relationship to the larger ecosystem, proportional to the rip in our hull? And I think that, you know, Looney was right. We're growing sort of arithmetically, but we need to be growing exponentially. So I just want to leave us with a question of how we do that, because it's clear that we are in fact in revolutionary times. I mean, we had a guy on a panel from the tech sector about 6 weeks ago that was saying human knowledge is doubling every 12 and a half minutes. Every sector of human society is in, I would say, radical foment. Except for the elites. I heard a statistic today that the upper 1% of the human race has increased their value and profits by 30 to 50% since the pandemic began. And I just wonder how we factor that in our equation, that there are vast interests out there that are actually profiting out of our calamity, which makes our challenge more acute in terms of need. But the complexities that we face in order to maximize social change almost incomprehensibly complex. So I just wanted to add those few points because I was appreciating the conversation, but I was also feeling increasingly excruciated by the conversation, fearing that you're right and that humanity is slowly losing ground because somehow we can't change the consciousness of our political and business and finance sectors who control the wealth, control the power. Because we're in a world where it's no longer the priests that govern, like in the Middle Ages. It's the corporations. So Ellie, I applaud Michelle, Cecile, Looney. I applaud what you're doing. You're on the front lines. No doubt about it. And the complexities that we're all facing during this time are immense. And if we just look at what's happening in the United States between Trump and Biden and the election coming out, we see in a microcosm the density of the contradictions that the world is grappling with as the pandemic continues to subsume us. And solutions need to be brought in to stark relief, adopted. And yet that lag between the crisis and the solutions is just slowly getting longer and longer and longer and longer. And how we all interact with that is powerful, global, and intensely personal question, in my view. And I wish we had another half hour to get all of your responses, because I know I'm giving a strong point of view. And in fact, if Rick will indulge me, I would love just to have each of you, starting with you, Looney, then Cecile, then Michelle, and Ellie, just respond to what I just said, and then we'll bring it to a close, because I want the richness of the dialogue to surface. Looney, what do you think?
Real quick, this crazy business school that started me on this journey, that's what we were talking about for the 7-8 years I was hanging out there. How to make change in the world. And the answer is, it's very, very hard. You can make change in existing orgs, but that's a cultural shift, and changing cultures is incredibly hard to do. And you can make change in the world by bringing forth a new system and new ideas, but they start small and take a long time to grow. Those are your only two choices.
Wise man, thank you. Cecile.
Well, I'll quote Chaim Weizmann, who was Israel's first president, who said, difficult things take a long time, impossible things take a little longer. So I think we need all just to, buckle up and do what we all need to do to the best of our abilities, show personal engagement and passion, and you really can't be what you can't see. So be role models and do the best we can to get the movement forward. It'll just take some more time, but I have 4 daughters and 2 grandchildren, and I have to build a better world for them and for everyone's children. So it's just not a question. It might take a little longer, but I'll put in all the efforts that I possibly can. I believe other people will too.
Thank you. It's for the children in the end. You're absolutely right. Under the 7th generation. Well put, well put. Michelle.
Yeah, I hear your pain. Nothing happens fast enough for me in this ecosystem, for sure. But I do believe that the tipping point comes when we can match. Everyone knows money's power. When we can teach people that we have tools for them to combine and democratize the access to capital, that we will start to see shifts in not just impact and the movement of capital, but also things that we don't think of as necessarily correlated, like civic engagement. A lot of what's happening in our society and the deterioration is as a direct result of living in a state of perpetual scarcity. So, by introducing people to options that empower them to get out of scarcity, both financially, not just economically, but also just mentally, I think that we could reach the tipping point a lot faster. And I still hold a lot of faith in human beings. It's kind of like the jury mentality that 12 people are so much smarter than any one individual. We just have to get to the point where we're starting to see the tipping point in the education and the access. We've never had tools like we have now. We have tools. I think investment crowdfunding is one of the most important ones because it is so accessible. So I think that once we realize that we can go beyond talk, that we can actually get there. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And Ellie, you get the last word.
Oh gosh, the pressure. Fully 100% aligned with Michelle. I have faith as well. I see your frustration and the need for speed. I love the saying, it's like, alone you go faster, but together you go further. So I do believe it's a numbers game in that sense. I'm buoyed by the fact that we're in the largest generational wealth transfer of all times. And already younger people are so much more aware than even I was, and I'm not even that old. So go figure, right? It's like it can only get better. And I believe COVID is a time of inward introspection. And I would hope that for every single person that has the opportunity to introspect, that intrinsic motivation to do better, and that intrinsic motivation to then bring that and contribute and share it will come to the fore in whichever form, because I believe everyone has something to share, whether that's knowledge, connections, money, bread. Like it's so versatile what you can bring. Like you bring yourself, you bring your energy. So I hope that will actually galvanize even more so, if not now, when.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And by the way, if any of the panel and those of you watching on Zoom want to stay for the after session, there's a group of our participants that have just on their own developed sort of an after session chat group, which is very interesting. It allows anybody who wants to just talk and get better acquainted and express their views in a more informal atmosphere. So that link is now up on the chat. And then tomorrow, we're going to be going back, as we do quite frequently, to the young people, to the people in their 20s and early 30s who are the generation that are reaping the whirlwind and know probably more than any other generation in history what's at stake. There's a whole panel tomorrow looking at some of the complexities and challenges of the pandemic and how young people are dealing with these and related issues. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate this panel. You've been very, very thoughtful and deeply engaging. And it increases my confidence in the human future. And we'll see you again tomorrow, 5:00 p.m. Central European Time, again here on Zoom for a next gen dialogue about the current and future state of the world. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.